Well, let's return to what's happening up there in Cairns and far north Queensland. Some residents are criticising the Bureau of Meteorology's forecasting of the North Queensland flood event. Sky News weather meteorologist Rob Sharpe joins me now. Rob, the sort of, if you like, layman's prognosis on all of this is cyclones meant to come in and then move inland, and this one just sat there. Is that accurate? And what have you made of the Bureau's communication around this record-breaking rain event?
Yeah, it's essentially the worst case scenario that you can get in terms of a flood event from a Category 2 tropical cyclone. It came in, it stopped, and then it just continued there. But it was quite a tricky system to forecast. I remember being in the office back on Friday, and I found it quite hard to know whether it was going to move into the Gulf or stay over land as a low and continue to produce the heavy rainfall. Now, my main issue with how the Bureau forecasted this event goes back to Saturday. Now, back on Saturday morning, the Bureau of Meteorology was suggesting that the rainfall was easing on the tropical coast, and they were saying that there was no signs of it escalating further.
We will still see some significant accumulations along this coastline here, but intensities here are falling. They're easing compared to the heavy rain in the past few days, which is why we've dropped this coastal area out of the severe weather warning.
It was quite interesting to hear that he was downplaying that event as if the worst was now over. But at that exact time, there were some forecast models that were indicating that there was potential for significant rain on that east coastline. Not all forecast models were suggesting what his forecast model behind him was suggesting. And the Bureau would have had access to that. They have access to plenty of forecast models. Now, the other aspect behind not explaining that full realm of risk was that later on that day, their own in-house high-resolution model was suggesting there was potential for totals as high as 1,750 millimetres on the North Tropical Coast in the next 36 hours. So that model came through to them around 7 p.m. that evening. They then waited until late that evening to then include the North Tropical Coast in that warning area. And when they did that, they were still issuing warnings around 400 to 500 millimetres. So they weren't escalating it beyond what they had when the system initially made landfall. On top of that, they also failed to issue any tweets around that warning either, like they typically did. So for anybody following on social media in the middle of the night, they would have had no warning either. People would have had to check themselves on the Bureau's website to find out any details. And for most people, they found out when the rain was tipping buckets on Sunday morning.
So basically, Rob, it's understandable why the Bureau said the most likely scenario was that the cyclone would not provide too much more rain and move inland, but you're saying there should have always been the added caveat, there's a chance we get this much extra rain, the amount you spoke about, which is often how weather forecasts work, right? There's a certain percentage given to rainfall and there's a big bandwidth of potential rainfall. So there should have been more of a caveat. The most likely forecast was fair enough, but they should have been saying there's a chance it gets a lot worse than that. Is that the way to sum it up in terms of how we, the consumer, get the weather news?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, Tom. So there was that potential for this to escalate dramatically if the system stalled over land, and that's exactly what took place in the end. It may not have been the most likely scenario on Saturday morning, but it was in the realms of possibility. I remember it was a possibility back on Friday that the system could stall and continue to produce heavy rainfall. So it's something that I think the Bureau might need to work on a little bit more in terms of their communication around these complex, high-risk events, because this is similar feedback to what the Bureau got back with the Lismore floods as well.
Rob Sharpe there. Very interesting. Thank you for that. Yeah.